Welcome to Ice Cream with Authors, the podcast that brings mini author visits straight to your home or car. I'm Becca Werwell, one of your hosts and award-winning author of the Road Trip Rescue series.
And I'm Amanda Trumpauer, your other host. I write for Jesus lovers who dig dragons, detectives, and droids.
Imagine sitting down with your favorite scoop of ice cream and chatting with the authors who write the stories you love. That's exactly what we do here. Whether you're a kid or a grown-up who loves faith-filled chapter books and middle-grade adventures, this is the place for you.
Each episode, we dive into delightful conversations with inspiring Christian writers, discovering new books and sweet stories that nourish the soul. So grab your ice cream, get cozy, and let's share a treat together.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Ice Cream with Authors. We're delighted to have you here with us today. Our guest is Mark Wainwright. Mark is a middle grade author and he writes contemporary realistic fiction. And his book, Trapped in a Hot Air Balloon, has us thinking about hot air balloons today. So, Amanda, have you ever ridden in a hot air balloon or done anything kind of on that level?
I have not. I have never ridden in a hot air balloon. I have been to hot air balloon festivals. I have seen them inflated up close. You could not pay me enough money to ever go inside a hot air balloon. The most adventurous thing I have done that's even remotely related to this has nothing to do with the air. It has everything to do with a vehicle on the ground. I worked at a summer camp in my college years. And at night, the captain of the camp took a bunch of us in a Kubota, which is kind of like a Jeep crossed with an all-terrain vehicle, maybe like an ATV. And he strapped us in there, and we went hurtling down. I'll call it the mountainside in the dark, where there was trees and mud and deep ravines. It was a time-honored activity at camp for the staff. We called it mudding. It was not safe. It was super fun. It was a little life-threatening, but it was nowhere near as life-threatening as being in a hot air balloon, which, again, I will never, ever, ever do.
Yeah, especially after reading Mark's book, that I would be like, I don't think I'll get in a hot air balloon. I have also never ridden in a hot air balloon, nor would I have a strong desire. I have been to a hot air balloon festival before, and similar to you, I think a lot of my camp experiences would have that thrill while still feeling a little more in my grasp. Maybe not quite to your level. That sounds actually relatively life-threatening. But I loved like the zip line. I loved the high ropes course. I don't mind being high in the air as long as I feel secure. So if I'm harnessed in, then we're good to go. Although I haven't done anything like that in years. So I don't know what it would be like now. But I think the most dangerous thing I've done in terms of a vehicle was when I was in Peru. I had lived there for a semester in college. I was teaching English. And the one weekend I was asked if I wanted to go out to the mountains with a group who was going out there to minister to a village. And I said, sure, I'll go out to the mountains. I like mountains. No.
Do you now?
No, not those mountains, not driving on them. I could have walked on those mountains. Sure, I would have loved to hike them. That would have been fine. But being in a vehicle where it was like one lane, and we were going around these tight corners around these mountains where it was just totally steep on the ends. And they told us they were doing something called honk and pray, where they would literally just honk around these blind corners and pray that there wasn't a car coming in the other direction. So that, I would say, is something that I would have no desire to ever do again. And actually, given the choice between a hot air balloon and getting in that vehicle again, I would choose the hot air balloon every time.
Oh my goodness, that sounds terrifying.
But luckily, books are not always terrifying. So
yeah.
Trying to think of a good transition here.
This is a safe way to experience riding in an air balloon.
There you go. Yeah. Through Mark's book, you can experience the thrill without actually putting your life in danger.
What a great tagline for books in general.
Yes, I love it. Okay, on that note, let's jump into our interview with Mark.
Our guest today is Mark Wainwright. Mark loves using words to entertain, instruct, and inspire. After 16 years in the book publishing industry, he now teaches professional writing courses at a Christian college in Florida. His fiction and nonfiction books continue to delight kids of all ages. Mark, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Amanda and Becca. Thank you for the opportunity to chat, to provide fun content for your listeners. I know that we're going to have a lot of fun.
Yes, we are so excited. We've already had a lot of fun chatting with you before we got on this call. Well, before we started recording this call, I should say. But the first question we always like to ask, since this is Ice Cream with Authors, Mark, what is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Wow, that is a tough question. And it's a tough question because I'm a Wainwright. And throughout the Wainwright lineage and history, we have been voracious ice cream eaters. But, well, I'd say it's a tie between the refreshingly sweet taste of mint chocolate chip and the smooth, rich flavor of butter pecan. They're both super duper yummy.
With that pitch alone, I just want to eat both now.
Yeah, I am feeling like I need some ice cream, especially we're recording this early. And so mint chocolate chip is sounding like a good fit for December. So
Absolutely. Yum, yum, yum.
So, Mark, tell us about your book, Trapped in a Hot Air Balloon.
Well, Trapped in a Hot Air Balloon is about two siblings, Jenny and Cole, who, through a series of circumstances, they get a free ride in a hot air balloon, and they're so excited, except something goes wrong. And then they get trapped in a hot air balloon, as the cover says, and then they have to deal with the consequences of learning to survive, of learning to get along with one another. Now, of course, there's backstory and there's tension and conflict, and so they're working through issues among themselves and the external hot air balloon drifting out of control.
I have to ask, Mark, why a hot air balloon? What inspired you to write about hot air balloons? Have you ever ridden in one or attended a festival or anything like that?
Absolutely. So when I was a kid, I lived in Colorado Springs. Now, guess where this book is set? It's set in Colorado Springs. And when I was a kid, I had the opportunity to go up in a hot air balloon, and it was an amazing experience. I had so much fun, and I always kept that little experience, that amazing experience in my mind. And then when it came time for writing, for thinking of story matter, that idea always just captivated me. And sometimes I play the what if game, like what if something happened? And so I thought, well, what if there wasn't a pilot in the hot air balloon? What if it was only a couple kids? What would they do? Or what would I do if I were in that hot air balloon without the pilot at the controls? And so that was one of the things that got me thinking about the content of that book.
I love that you mentioned the question, what if? Because that is my favorite thing to say to young storytellers in terms of a great question to ask, that what if question. But I guess you weren't asking the what if question while you were up in the hot air balloon.
No, definitely not at that point. No.
So it sounds like your hot air balloon was very formative. Your hot air balloon experience was very formative to writing this book. Have your travels in other ways, other places, other vehicles influenced your writing as well?
Well, I have done quite a bit of traveling. My parents were missionaries in Papua New Guinea. And so on our way there and back, we visited quite a few countries. I've been to all 50 states and to 33 countries. I've ridden elephants in Thailand. I've been attacked by a monkey on a Mediterranean island. I've been hang gliding. In this past summer, my family and I traveled to Hawaii, and I actually went swimming with sharks. And that was a crazy experience, but a lot of fun as well.
Wow. So I kind of just was researching sharks in Hawaii for a previous book. I'm curious, what species did you swim with?
There were lemon sharks and Galapagos sharks.
Okay.
And we went off. There was not a cage. You take this boat out about 3 miles offshore, and they hear the boat, and for whatever reason they're curious, and so they come and they circle underneath you. There were probably 40 different sharks swimming below us. Now, they were still a little bit of a distance, but they came probably as close as about 20 feet away. And it was crazy. It was crazy, but a lot of fun as well.
Do you think that might be a future book, Trapped in Shark-Infested Waters?
You never know. You never know.
Honestly, it sounds like you have so many rich travel experiences that you could draw on for future book titles.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. However, I will say I've also learned that great stories can also occur much closer to home. Mm-hmm. Some of the best stories take place at home or at school or even with our brothers and sisters.
Oh, that's true. I feel like you've given us so much great advice for kids who might want to write themselves, asking that question, what if, looking around in their daily lives and in their everyday relationships, like with their siblings, and seeing where there might be a story. Do you have other advice that you would give kids who want to write stories?
Yeah. I guess you have to know, well, why are you going to write? Now, for me personally, one of my main goals is to tell a great story. And of course, there are many ways to do that. Writers have a lot of decisions to make. They need to decide on characters, on what those characters will do. They have to decide on a writing style, where the story will start, where it will end. There's a lot of important decisions. So yes, I definitely want to tell a fascinating story, but my main goal goes even beyond that. The most important decision I've made for my writing is that I want to honor God with the words that I use. One of my favorite verses is Psalm 19:14. That verse says, "Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer." So basically, I want my words to honor the Lord. It's not just about what I write, but about how I write. It's about honoring the Lord through the type of stories I choose to describe and through the type of words I use.
Mark, I'm so glad you've shared this, because that is so much of Amanda and I's heart behind this show, is to have Christian creators on who love to create, because we were created in the image of a creative God, and he has given us this ability to share stories that can touch readers' hearts and that our words can glorify him. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's wonderful advice for any young storytellers out there. So now we're curious, what type of kid would enjoy reading your books?
Oh, well, I have Trapped in a Hot Air Balloon. That is ideal for middle grade readers. So fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth grade, roughly in that age range. And because it deals with siblings and sibling rivalry, kids can get a lot out of that. It's sometimes families have difficult issues. There are really strong issues that they face, but this provides hope. And it talks about forgiveness and getting along, those universal themes that we're able to draw upon.
I really love books about forgiveness. For those who have read my stories, they'll see that's a theme that runs through my books as well. And I do think that it's relatable for kids and also important for them to see that others go through struggles and that God is there and he can help us forgive even when it's hard. Absolutely. And he forgives us even when we make mistakes too. So with that, we're going to pause to listen to chapter 1 of Trapped in a Hot Air Balloon.
Grrr, whoosh! Fire roared out of the steel burners and gushed into the hot air balloon, forcing it to lurch upward. As the inferno pounded its fury into the balloon above them, the basket holding Jenny and Cole hovered 6 inches off the ground. The wicker basket creaked and cracked, straining against the ropes anchoring it to the earth. If the siblings didn't do something quickly, the basket might break loose from the ropes and they'd be launched miles into the sky. If that happened, they'd be doomed for sure. There was no way they could survive up there in the bitter cold and lack of oxygen, and if that didn't kill them, they'd be suffocated by their hatred for each other. Jenny turned to Cole and shrieked, "What did you do? Turn it off!" "Can't," yelled Cole at the top of his lungs. Blood oozed from a cut on his left temple. His lips moved as if they were still speaking, but the sound of raging flames drowned out the 9-year-old's voice. 5 minutes earlier, Mr. Weber, the gray-haired pilot of the hot air balloon, had instructed the siblings to climb into the wicker basket. Jenny stumbled as she climbed over the railing of the tall basket wall, but Mr. Weber quickly saved her from falling by reaching out a calloused hand and steadying her as she climbed the rest of the way in. Jenny had been a little nervous about the flight, but that nervousness evaporated when she realized that there would be an experienced pilot at the controls. The colorful balloon billowed like an enormous blimp above their heads. Jenny stared at the kaleidoscope of color, her excitement swelling for this once-in-a-lifetime adventure. She sure was glad they'd met the pilot last week at the Labor Day Liftoff Balloon Festival. Jenny smiled just thinking about how perfect it had been that she and her family were able to help out the pilot when his crew hadn't shown up. And now, the siblings were being rewarded with their very own balloon ride. Within the next few minutes, they'd launch and float away into the morning sky. "Thanks, Mr. Weber," Jenny said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "I've always dreamed of flying in a real hot air balloon." Mr. Weber looked up from pressing buttons on an electronic gadget attached to the basket's frame. He slipped a rusty screwdriver into the pocket of his denim overalls and smiled. Decades of hard work had etched deep wrinkles into his skin, but his grandpa-like face still radiated a warm playfulness. "You're mighty welcome, young lady," he said in a southern drawl. "Glad to have you aboard." After programming the electronic device, Mr. Weber glanced up from the propane tanks, then patted his pockets. Finally, he began rummaging through a leather pouch attached to the basket's wall. His relaxed grin drooped low. Guess I forgot my wrench back at the truck." He scratched his gray beard while looking around. "Must have forgotten my coffee, too. Can't be taken off without that," he said with a chuckle. "Y'all stay here. Be right back." He heaved his aging body awkwardly out of the basket. As Mr. Weber trudged toward his pickup truck about 200 feet away, Cole climbed onto the top railing of the balloon's basket. He wobbled from side to side while making goofy faces, pretending to lose his balance. "Get down," Jenny scolded, glaring at him. Being 4 years older than her brother, she felt responsible to tell him everything he did wrong in life. "Or else," she continued, "Mr. Weber won't take you up in the balloon." "Can't make me," Cole spat back, his voice teasing. "I can do whatever I want." He stuck his tongue out at Jenny, then added, "You're not my boss." "Whatever," she said, rolling her eyes. Turning her back to him, she glanced at her cell phone. 7:22 a.m. Daylight had inched its way over the horizon less than an hour ago. The sun's orange glow had already begun warming the chilly air. And even though Mr. Weber's ranch lay about 20 miles east of Colorado Springs, Jenny could still see the rugged outline of Pikes Peak off in the distance beyond the city. Jenny was sweating after all the hard work it had taken to set up the balloon. She unzipped her purple puffer vest and was about to take it off and toss it onto the floor, but then decided not to. The basket's plywood floor had clumps of dirt scattered on it from her and Cole's shoes, and she didn't want to get the vest dirty since it was fairly new. A breeze rustled Cole's straw-colored hair. The draft wasn't strong, but the 70-foot balloon was a huge target for it. The balloon towered over them, swaying from side to side. Jenny stared out at Mom, Dad, and Mrs. Weber, who were all trying to keep the balloon steady by pulling and fighting with the crown line. That's what Mr. Weber had called the long rope that draped from the top of the balloon to the ground. With Mom and Dad distracted, Cole pulled back the sleeves of his blue sweater. His eyebrows narrowed and a mischievous grin twisted his lips as he glanced at Jenny to make sure that she wasn't watching. Then he reached toward the support beams that arched above his head. The beams held the twin burners that turned propane fuel into a gushing fireball when ignited by the pilot. The heat from those flames provided the lift that pushed the hot air balloon into the sky. Cole choked back a laugh, then made a face at Jenny, who still had her back turned to him. With one last silent taunt, he jumped up to grab onto the beam. But as he gripped the beam and jerked his legs upward to hang upside down like a circus acrobat to scare his sister, his shoe slammed into the ignition switch at the base of the burners. At that exact moment, a sharp cracking sound, like an empty soda can being stomped on, splintered the air. Grrr, whoosh! Flames erupted from the burners like a geyser, shooting angry fire into the balloon. And with that fire, blistering heat. Cole ripped his hands loose from the metal support beam and flung himself away from the ferocious flames. He tumbled back into the basket, his head scraping against the wicker wall. Jenny whirled around when she heard the roaring burners. "What did you do?" she shrieked. "Turn it off!" Cole scooched into a sitting position in the corner of the basket. "Can't!" He tried to say more, but was distracted by the dizziness blurring his vision. He shook his head, but his eyes were still foggy and unfocused. That's when Jenny noticed the stream of blood oozing from a cut on his left temple. Jenny scrambled toward the control gauge attached to the support frame. The cell phone-sized gadget displayed a bunch of digital numbers and symbols. It looked incredibly complicated. Wanting the inferno to stop, Jenny frantically pressed all the buttons, but nothing calmed the raging burners. Meanwhile, the balloon towered above their heads, a patchwork of vibrant reds, yellows, greens, purples, and blues. The nylon fabric heaved upward with energy, ready to escape the clutches of Earth, ready to soar to freedom. The balloon's suspension cables, attached to the burner frame, tugged fiercely at the passenger basket below. In response, the wicker basket, just slightly larger than their dining room table at home, creaked and cracked. The basket hovered and quivered inches above the prairie grass. Several ropes secured the basket to a metal spike that Mr. Weber had pounded into the ground. These ropes, along with the crown line that Jenny's parents and Mrs. Weber were still clinging to, were the only things left anchoring the balloon in place. The twin burners continued spewing a firestorm of fury into the belly of the billowing beast. As lava-like heat blazed down on Jenny, all she could think about was how to escape from being roasted like a marshmallow.
So, Mark, what do you hope kids take away after reading Trapped in a Hot Air Balloon?
Well, I definitely want them to enjoy the story. Of course, I love it when kids can't put a book down. And I've had kids say, "I read it in one whole day." And when I hear that, it makes me so excited. I know all the hard work of writing and editing and editing. Oh, and did I say editing comes into play there? Certainly, writing is hard work. So when kids enjoy the story, that's fantastic.
And then they email you on Tuesday and they're like, "So can I have the next one?" And you're like, "But it took me a whole year."
Oh, no, exactly. Well, actually, let me tell you this. Sometimes kids will ask me, "How long did it take you to write that book?" And I tell them, actually, when I was writing this book, the draft, the ideas came very quickly, and I was able to write it in 4 months. Now, I do work a full-time job, and so I wrote it in the evenings after my kids went to bed. But the ideas and the story and the characters and the plot all came together. But it was about 8 more months after that of hard revision and editing and redevelopment and taking out this chapter and putting this chapter in. So definitely a fascinating story. But again, I want kids to know that there's hope, that there is forgiveness, that we can get along, that we can, in the midst of challenges and hardship in our lives, that God provides hope and healing to us.
What an important message. I love that you're providing a fun adventure that also is filled with hope and filled with that reminder that God is with us and that God heals us. So Mark has offered to give away a signed copy of Trapped in a Hot Air Balloon to one of you. And this is a US only giveaway. And what you'll do is you'll email us a code word, which we'll get here from Mark in a moment, within a week of when the episode airs. So Mark, what is our code word?
Our code word is balloon.
balloon. So email icecreamwithauthors@gmail.com with the word balloon within a week of when this episode airs to be entered to win a signed copy of Mark's book.
So how can teachers, grandparents, parents connect with you, Mark, and learn more about your books and potentially book an author visit with you?
The best place to reach me is at my website, mark-wainwright.com. From there are links to where you can purchase my books, including For Trapped in a Hot Air Balloon.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Mark, for coming on and chatting with us today. This was really fun.
Absolutely. Thank you, Beck and Amanda, for a chance to share some interesting writing information with your listeners. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for joining us on Ice Cream with Authors. I hope you enjoyed our chat and found a new favorite book or author to love. Remember, the adventure doesn't end here. There are always more stories to discover.
If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with your friends. If you want to keep the conversation going, send an email to icecreamwithauthors@gmail.com with your comments or questions. We might respond in an episode to come. Until next time, keep reading and sharing the stories you love.